Okay, let's take a look at a few questions related to the Gordon Growth dividend discount model, or terminal value. An equity analyst at XYZ & Co. is valuing a company. In recent years, the company has had a dividend payout ratio between 30% and 50% in order to maintain a stable dividend. The analyst anticipates that the company can grow over time, given its return on equity of 14%. The analyst also estimates that the company's cost of equity is 10%. The current dividend payout ratio is 50%, and earnings per share for next year will be $6. Based on these assumptions, is the analyst's price target of $100 reasonable? Okay, let's try to solve this question. And the first thing with any question on a Series 86 exam is always look and get very clear on the question. So their questions, again, are very literally worded. So here they're asking us, based on these assumptions, is the analyst's price target of $100 reasonable? So what we need to do is come up with an estimate of the price target. So one thing that's really important to know and kind of unique here is that most of the time when we're calculating a formula for price, we have this formula that we're using, and let's say it's a dividend discount model. We're using this to come up with the price, or we might be solving this way if it's a company with debt, and once you get EV, you'll back into market cap based off of debt and cash, and they'd have to give you shares outstanding, etc. So what's clear with this first is that they don't seem to indicate there's any debt associated here. So we can pretty much ignore this and expect that we're not going to have to calculate enterprise value. One other thing to note that's very unique to this exam is when they ask us to calculate the price target, that is defined on the 86 as a price that is 12 months from the present time. So that's really important to know because there's a couple ways to go about calculating that. One way is to solve for P0, which remember is the present value of the price per share, or the intrinsic value per share. And then to go 12 months forward, let's call that P1, we're going to do the same thing we would do in order to solve for D1, which is to say we're going to take the price that we solve for and multiply it by 1 plus G. This ends up being a major component to this question, and oftentimes people overlook this very last step. So first we're going to start with the formula that we're more familiar with, which is the D1 over K minus G. The one reason why we know to start with this is because of the inputs they give us. So you'll notice here that we're given the cost of equity of 10%, so that's our K. So K is 10%. You'll also notice here that there's the little hints being dropped on how to get growth. For anyone that's been through this exam or practice questions before or a number of times, you'll know that there's a shortcut in order to calculate G, which is sometimes also referred to as internal growth. So the internal growth of a company is its return on equity times 1 minus the dividend payout ratio. And in this case, calculating growth would be based off of the ROE they give us of 14%. We'd times that, multiply that by 1 minus, and the 50% discount dividend payout ratio is the one we're going to use here. And this little 30% to 50% tidbit is more just extra information we can ignore. So when we take 14% and multiply it by 1 minus the dividend payout ratio, which another way of saying this whole thing is a retention ratio, that's going to ultimately give us 7% because you have half times 14%, 7%. So now we have a good chunk of our formula, which is 10% as K, dividend on the cost of equity, and the growth rate of 7. We do still need to figure out what D1 is. So another way we can figure out D1 here, or just what the dividend might be, is to look at any components that may look somewhat familiar. And we see down here they give us an EPS estimate of $6, and they're saying that's for next year. So since next year we can kind of say is EPS 1, and we know they have a payout ratio of 50%, EPS 1 being $6, we'd say D1 is going to be 50% of the $6 because they give us a payout ratio of 50%. And just a reminder, dividend payout ratio is dividends as a percentage of earnings per share. So if it's dividend payout ratio is 50%, we don't know what dividends are. We know that EPS is $6. Then we'll do the math there, which ends up getting us $3 as dividend. One thing to keep in track of as well here is which D are we talking about? Are we talking about dividend 1, as in next year's dividend, or are we talking about today's dividend? Well, since we applied the 50% to next year's EPS, we can also make this a safe assumption that this is representing next year's dividend. Since this is next year's dividend, we don't need to do the formula where we take today's dividend and extrapolate out by 12 months by doing multiplying it by 1 plus G. So since we already have D1, we don't need to multiply the dividend by 1 plus G. We can now just plug it in our formula. So let's do that now. We get D1 being $3. Divide that by 7. And this ultimately spits out $100. So you can see that $100 is the price today. And remember, this is not our final price. Our price target is in fact going to be P1, which is the price today times 1 plus G. And when we do 1 plus G, we're going to get 100 times 1 plus the growth rate of 6%. And, I'm sorry, 7%. So this ends up working out to a price target of 107. So as you can see here, we would say, well, the price target should be 107. So actually a price target of 100 might be a little lower than might be reasonable. Overall, the key takeaway when studying for the Series 86 exam is that if you're ever asked about a question that relates to price target, or you need to confirm or come up with a price target, you're not using the price that you've solved from the dividend discount model or from the Gordon growth model. You're going to take that out and extend it out by 1 year by applying 1 plus the growth rate. There are other instances where you can calculate the forward, the price target, and oftentimes that can be used by incorporating a forward EPS number. So for example, if you have a PE ratio and you know the PE ratio for a specific company, you could use the forward EPS and apply the price target multiple. So for example, if you expect the forward EPS to be $2 per share and they're saying that a good target PE multiple would be 20 times, you would take 20 times and multiply that by the $2 as the $2 forward EPS estimate to get a $40 price target. That's the other way to do it. This is usually a more involved way, but either way, you're dealing with a price that is estimated to be 1 year from now.